Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Salmon. I'm the Deputy Director of Campaigns and Outreach for the Office of Cannabis Management. Thank you all for coming. Over the last 2 months or so, we've been traveling the state, really delivering the message and the information on conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. We've been everywhere from Syracuse to Buffalo, Brooklyn, Harlem, Utica, Schenectady, Albany. We will be in Rochester very soon. So really happy to have everyone here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to ground ourselves in the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act first. That was the bill that was passed to legalize cannabis in the state of New York. And after that, we're going to go into the particulars of CAURD, our conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. Just to note, beforehand, we released a Google form where people filled out questions. We are going to do our best to answer those questions. We're also going to leave the Google form open. So if we do not have time to get to every question, that you can still send in your questions and we will actually directly respond to you with answers. So get ready, get set, here we go. So cannabis legalization here in New York State. So what is the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act? This was the bill that was signed into law on March 31st of 2021, last year. And this legalized adult use cannabis here in the state of New York. It also expanded our medical program that we had prior. It also represents a way that we haven't treated cannabis here in the state of New York. I want to flag that cannabis is still a Schedule I drug federally. It is legal in the state of New York. But for example, if you are in possession of cannabis and you cross a state line, let's say from New York to New Jersey or New York to Massachusetts, technically that is still a crime. So we really want to flag that this is legal in the state of New York, but still federally a Schedule I drug. Let's move on to the next slide. So what is legal in the state of New York? So now what we consider adult use is 21 and over. You can possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis flower and up to 24 grams of concentrated cannabis. We're talking about oils, tinctures, vapes, etc. And it can be consumed in your private home. I want to flag, again, if you live in public housing in NYCHA, in public housing upstate, this is still a federally Schedule I drug, and you are not allowed to smoke in public housing because of that. Currently, home cultivation is not legal in the New York State. It will be very soon. Medical patients will be given the first crack at this. And you're allowed to have up to 6 plants for personal use. That's 3 mature plants and 3 immature plants. And it's a maximum of 12 plants per household, even if there are more than 3 or more than adults at the age above age 21. I want to highlight that one of the things that the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act did was create the agency that I work for and that all of us work for over at the Office of Cannabis Management. In 2014, we also in the state of New York established our medical cannabis program and our hemp program. Those were under the auspice of the Department of Health. That is now under our purview at the Office of Cannabis Management. I really want to highlight these licenses. These are the 9 licenses under the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. And just to be very clear, this is different than the conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses that we'll be speaking about in a minute. These are the licenses that the MRTA designated. So, for example, we have a cultivator license, a nursery license, processor license, retail dispensary licenses, adult use cooperative licenses, on-site consumption, delivery, and a micro license. I want to highlight that the great thing about the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act was that it didn't allow for vertical integration, meaning you can't own more than one license at a time. The only license that you can participate from seed to sale is the micro license. This is the only license that you can be involved in cultivation, processing, as well as be a participant in the retail division. Social equity. Social equity, as our executive director, Chris Alexander, said, this is not a thing, this is the thing that we are trying to deliver here. So 40% of the tax revenue is going straight back to communities that have been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. Another thing that we've done is we've expunged up to 400,000 records. If you had, for example, a 220 or a 221 under the penal code, you have a record that was expunged. This doesn't mean that we can't see that you have, with the proper paperwork, we will be able to make sure that you are considered as a social equity applicant, but your record now is expunged. So many times we've seen folks that were prevented from housing, gaining employment because of these records. And this is something that the MRTA did. So while these slides seem to be a little off right here as far as the percentages, this is the New York State Cannabis Revenue Fund. This is exactly what I was talking about previously, about the 40% of the tax revenue going right back into communities that have been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. So as far as education, as far as community grant reinvestment, say you're a local community-based organization and you wanted to run a program on the history of the criminalization of cannabis, you would be able to apply for grants with us. Drug treatment and public education. These are also things that this tax revenue fund will go to. I want to also stress that you don't have to touch flower in order to be in the cannabis industry. There are ancillary businesses, just like every other industry, that supports that said industry. So packaging and labeling, greenhouse systems, vape and other cannabis devices, e-commerce websites. If you're a graphic designer, retail design firms, security. These are all ancillary businesses that will support the cannabis industry and that people should definitely look into. So, supporting the work of OCM in your community, as I stated, I'm a Deputy Director of Campaigns and Outreach. A big part of my job and our team's job is to get the word out, and we need your help with that. So, first, we want you to sign up with OCM, okay, right at that link that you see in the slide, so that you can get all of the updates, okay? Everything that we are doing, we are being transparent and we are releasing updates. Anytime our board approves anything, that is also released. Anytime we have a board meeting, you can view that live. And you can also sign up as far as what you're particularly interested in. Are you interested in cultivation? Are you interested in the micro license? This gives us a better gauge on what people are really thinking out there. Also, as I stated before, we are hosting events all around the state. We want you to keep coming to these events. And we also know that you have particular events and gatherings within your respective communities that we should be attending. I want to flag that we are a small agency at this point. We are a new agency. I think we have about 115 employees at this point. Just to put that into perspective, agencies have hundreds of employees to be well-oiled machines. So we can't come to every event that you propose, but we will definitely try, and we want to be in the know of what's going on around the state and in your community. How do you stay connected with us? So if you have a comment, whether it's something that you think we should pay attention to, something you've heard in your community, something that impacts you directly, we want you, and it's about regulations, we want you to email regulations@ocm.ny.gov. If you are submitting a CAURD application, right, and you have direct questions about that process, we also want you to email licensing@ocm.ny.gov. Also, please follow us on Twitter at NYS_cannabis. One of the first things that the Office of Cannabis and Management did, one of the first campaigns, was to really educate people on the public health piece. You might see our advertisements in the train talking about adult use, 21 and over. You might see billboards coming off the Jackie Robinson Highway. So these are all messages that we are trying to convey to the public on safe consumption, adult use, and how to be healthy. So this is the main piece here. This is what are conditional licenses. We're about to go into the CAURD program, conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. So I want to flag right off the bat that this is a very small program in comparison to the 9 licenses and the other programs we will be issuing in the future. We're talking about 100 to 200 licenses for CAURD applicants, if you are chosen, in comparison to thousands of licenses that will be issued under the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act in the near future. So conditional licenses were created to kickstart the New York State cannabis industry in order to take advantage of the grow cycle and not miss a grow cycle. We converted a number of hemp farmers that were already licensed by the state and converted them and transitioned them into cannabis cultivators. So what is CAURD? CAURD, as I've said a number of times, is conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. Again, it's a small number of licenses that we'll be issuing. And the great thing about CAURD is we're giving a lot of extra support. The Cannabis Investment Fund is dedicated to funding these operations and supporting the development of your new business. So, who is eligible for CAURD? Okay, there are 2 criteria points here. You have to be justice involved, and you have to have business ownership experience. So what does justice involved mean? Justice involved means, have you been negatively impacted by a cannabis arrest and or conviction that occurred in New York State before March 31st, 2022? Are you the person that was convicted of a 220 or a 221 conviction? And this is whether you were, arrested and convicted for having in your possession a small amount of cannabis, or you were caught and convicted with a number of pounds in your trunk. And that is all under cannabis convictions 220 or 221. Also, are your spouse. Okay, we understand that it's not just about said individual, it's about the family members. How did it impact the family moving forward? So, if your wife or your partner or your husband, etc., your spouse was convicted, this does mean that you are justice impacted. If you're a parent or a guardian, right? Or if you're a child or dependent, say my father was arrested and convicted of cannabis possession, I would be justice impacted, right? It affected my life. It might affect the amount of money that was coming into my household. So we are really trying to address not only the individual, but also the family members that obviously were impacted by cannabis prohibition. Does it have to be a cannabis conviction? Yes. Okay. We are addressing some of the atrocities that were that happened during the war on drugs and for cannabis prohibition. So we understand there are many of other ills of society, but what we are designated with doing is really addressing cannabis convictions and cannabis prohibition. So not only justice involved, right? The second criteria point is, do you have a business? Now, this business can be retail. You could have owned a business you were running in your apartment as a nail salon, a hair salon. Are you a barbershop owner? But this person who is justice involved must also have this type of business ownership experience. Running or managing a business will not be enough to suffice and to meet the criteria. You have to have 2 years at least of net profit. And just to say, we're not looking for exorbitant profit, okay? We understand times are tough. We just went through COVID, okay? So we just want to know that you can stay in the black. We are investing a significant amount of funds from the Social Equity Fund to prop these businesses up, to support them, to make sure that you succeed. And in order to do that, we also have to know that you can run a business and that you can comply with regulations. Another point is this business doesn't have to, you don't have to currently own it. You could have owned it 10 years ago. You could have owned it 20 years ago. As long as you have the proper paperwork to show that you own that business and you can show 2 years of net profit, you potentially are a CAURD applicant. So business ownership requirements, okay? I noted some of them in the previous slide, but let's go through this. The justice involved person applying must have owned at least 10% of that business, okay? And again, like I said, you don't have to currently own the business, but you must prove that you did at some point. We are also allowing not-for-profits to be a part of CAURD. There are certain provisions. This is different than being a for-profit business or having a for-profit business. So for example, a 501c3, or you operated under a 501c3 designation, you have to intentionally serve justice involved individuals that were disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. You must have operated and owned, managed a social enterprise that has been profitable for a minimum of 2 years. So that is the same criteria. Also, you have to have a minimum of five full-time employees. So this also, I just want to flag all of this information is available at cannabis.ny.gov. And I also want to flag that this presentation here will be on our YouTube channel. So if for some reason you have to hop off, you got the kids in the background, you got to go back to your job, you can also revisit this presentation later on. How can eligible applicants prepare now? Okay, so we all know, or most of us know, that our portal has been opened, right? The application is up and you can start to apply. We're going to want you to set up, and you'll be directed to do this in the application process. We want you to set up an account with the New York State Business Express. Get your documentation together. Apply with as much documentation as you have. I really want to flag this, okay? And we've had a number of questions about the $2,000 application fee. Okay, so the first part of the application is you will not be paying, right? It's the second part of the application in which we look at all of your criteria, everything you've provided for us, your documentation, your business plan, if you have it, etc. And we review that information, and then we determine, are you applicable for CAURD? Do you meet the criteria? And then part two is submitting a money order or a check of $2,000 so that we can start to process your application. Just to flag, we cannot start processing that application unless we receive said funds, that $2,000 application fee. So justice involvement, right? Where do you get your paperwork, right? So the proof, let's just run through the proof of conviction. Again, it has to be before 3/31/2021. Again, that's when the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act was enacted and passed. Many different types of documentation could be accepted. For example, a certificate of disposition. You can go to the Department of Justice, DCJS, where you can go and get your paperwork. You also can go to the local precinct that you were originally arrested in and pay a small fee. I believe it's around $10 to $15 to actually receive that paperwork that you can then apply with. And this will prove that you are justice involved. Also, where you lived at the time of the conviction matters. So applicants who lived in areas with low median household incomes at the time of arrest will be prioritized, right? So for example, if you live in a zip code that didn't have a high arrest rate of cannabis arrests, that didn't have certain criteria points, you will not be prioritized as much as a person who grew up in a highly policed area with a lot of cannabis arrests. Some places, I detailed some of this before, some places to get your documentation: the New York State Division of Criminal Justice and Services, DCJS. Again, from the jurisdiction where the arrest occurred, go and pay a small fee and get your paperwork. Also, proof of residence, a lease, a utility bill, postmarked envelope, letter from Public Housing Authority if you live in public housing, proof of relationship, marriage certificate, legal custody agreement. These are all documentation that we will receive and that we look to figure out if you fit the criteria for CAURD. So, previous ownership experience in regards to your business. Again, you don't have to currently own the business. The proof of the justice-involved individual. That justice-involved individual must own and control at least 10% of that business, okay? And the way that we'll see that is, do you have your articles of incorporation, your documentation that states exactly the makeup of your business? And again, you have to have at least 2 years of net profit when in that time that justice involved person owned that business. So if that profit margin, that 2 years of net profit in that business wasn't at the time when the justice involved individual owned at least 10% of that business, that does not meet the criteria for a CAURD applicant. Again, some places to get documentation, your tax returns, your incorporation agreements, and to show profitability, bank statements and records. Do you have audited financial statements? All of these are documents that we will accept to prove that you fit within the criteria for a CAURD applicant. Additional considerations. You'll need to submit information on your planned dispensary. Who will own and operate the dispensary? Anyone with a financial interest in your dispensary, individuals or vendors that you have contracts with. And I want to just be clear on this. If you do not have all your vendors ready, if you don't have all the agreements with you and your partners solidified, okay, we can accept that paperwork after, okay? That will be a part of your second part of the application process. We don't want to discourage folks who don't have all of this information just yet. We understand putting together a business takes time, and we want to be cognizant of that. Proposed true parties of interest will need to submit required disclosures, including tax returns, financial statements, and other required documents. We'll also ask for your preferred New York State geographic region where you want to operate. We understand that people have networks. They want to provide for their community, and their business might be in their community. But we do have a number of locations that will be provided by DASNY, and you might not get your first choice. You might get your second choice of region. So we need you to fill your preferred regions out. And also $2,000, it's a non-refundable applications and license fee. I want to state that the major barriers are a couple of them across the nation that have hindered and definitely blocked a lot of folks from entering the business is having, a couple $100,000 in the bank that's required, a exorbitant licensing fee. This is the lowest licensing fee across the nation. It's $2,000. And I want to state that doesn't go back it's non-refundable, but that $2,000 goes to is labor. It goes to the people that are paying the people that are processing all of these applications. So this is not about us taking that money and repurposing it somewhere else. This is about us processing those applications. CAURD information online, right? All of this is at cannabis.ny.gov under the CAURD tab. And we have all of this information. We have FAQs. We have what's a specific true party of interest. We have a lot of information that I just stated and more online. If you do not fit CAURD, please do not be discouraged. This is a small program, as I stated, in comparison to the 9 licenses that will be under the MRTA that will be opened up by the end of this year, top of next year. So you just have to wait a little bit longer if you do not qualify for CAURD. And I just want to state that, again, these are the 9 licenses that I am speaking about. This has nothing to do with CAURD, right? These are the 9 licenses that were designated under the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. These 9 licenses, we are working currently in drafting the regulations and the rules for these 9 licenses, and we will open these up by the end of this year, top of next year. small business development. Under these 9 licenses, we are going to be really providing a lot of small business development. We want to make sure that these businesses succeed. We don't want to disperse licenses and leave you alone. We actually want to try to help you succeed and be the proper support system that the agency intends to be. Thank you very much. We are now going to go into a Q&A. We had a Google form. I looked at a lot of the questions. If I do not get the time to answer every question, we will be responding directly to you by email. I also want to flag that the Google form will be open after this presentation. We will leave it open so that you can, follow up with questions that you have. Okay, one of the questions, do applicants need a business plan when applying? Look, again, we understand that gathering all this documentation, gathering your business plans, having everything, your vendors, everything solidified is very hard. So no, we will be asking for a business plan if you don't provide it in section 1 and section 2, but it is not initially required. No. Let's see what else we got here. So cannabis. If arrested with cannabis and a weapon, would you still be eligible? Yes, right? So there are certain charges that we have to take a second look at. Fraud charges, theft of services, things of that nature. But weapons charges, no, that will not disqualify you from being a CAURD applicant or a social equity applicant in general for the 9 other licenses that will be opening up. Do you need a third party to apply for CAURD? If I'm interpreting this question correctly, you do not need a third party. You have to meet the criteria that we just went over, being justice involved and also having business ownership experience. Okay. What does it mean to have significant presence in New York State? Okay, so again, we need to see a lease. Did you live here? Do you own property here? We need to see that. Did you pay anything? If you live in public housing, show us your documentation for that. There's many ways to prove that you have significant presence here in New York State. Okay, this is a question we've been getting a lot. Are you taking applications on a first come, first served basis? That is no, okay? We are gonna be ending our application process on September 26th. That's the last day to apply. After that closes, we will be reviewing all of the applications. We will be doing it by region, but it is not a first come, first served basis. I'm looking for questions. Okay. Okay, just got a question about home grow. We have yet to determine when home grow will begin. We know that medical patients will be the first to actually participate in the program. And if you look back at the slides, it's 12 plants per household. So you can look at this presentation, but we will be solidifying that soon. So just keep in touch. The application is available on cannabis.ny.gov. It's very easy. Fill out the first part. Again, we are not taking our money, we're not taking that licensing fee until we determine that you fit the criteria. Okay, we're going to take one more question, and then all other questions will be answered. If we haven't answered every question, we'll keep the Google form open, and I will be in touch. Okay, will nonprofits versus business applications be treated the same for evaluation purposes, or is there a quota for each overall? So I just want to highlight there are different criteria points for not-for-profits. We went over that in the slide. I encourage you to go back and look at the different criteria points, but they aren't treated the same. They are both under CAURD, but it is different criteria. Okay, I want to just close out. Thank you for coming. We will be having more events, everything to do with CAURD and the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, in the near future. Please sign up for our updates at cannabis.ny.gov. Please, look at our Twitter, our Instagram, everything that we do. We put out through social media as well, so you can be abreast of all of the ongoings happening at the Office of Cannabis Management. Thank you so much for coming. Again, the Google form will be still open. If I haven't answered your questions, please fill the Google form out and we will get right back to you. Thank you so much.